Hey there, everyone. It's Andy Baker here again, and I'm back with another episode of the Creative AI Podcast. And this week I get to reconnect with Dr. Duane Loose, a seasoned artist and educator in the field of interactive media and game development. We explore the evolution of art and design, the importance of knowledge and imagination, and the impact of technology on creativity. Dr. D shares his journey from traditional art to embracing digital tools like CAD and CGI, emphasizing the significance of foundational skills in art. The discussion also dives into the role of light and reflection in art and the aspiration to be a source of inspiration and creativity rather than merely reflecting existing ideas. We also discuss the intricate relationship between creativity, inspiration, and the role of AI in the artistic process, explore how trust in the creative process and collaboration can lead to innovative outcomes, while also addressing the challenges artists face, especially in light of personal setbacks. We also consider the ethical considerations of using AI in art, the evolving landscape of artistic expression, and the importance of preparing the next generation of artists to embrace these tools. Ultimately, we share our opinions about the need for artists to remain open to evolution and the potential of AI to enhance their creative journeys. Dr. D is a brilliant guy and someone I'm proud to call a friend, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, so I am on today with a very special guest because a lot of the people I've been talking to are people who, friends of friends or industry connections or people that I've reached out to. But this has been an opportunity to reconnect with someone I admire greatly. This is Dr. Duane Loose, who is a professor at the Interactive Media and Game Development Department at USC, which is a part of cinematic arts. He works on the game side of things. But that's a long preamble to this is somebody who has been working in the industry for decades, doing brilliant and amazing work. And just as a plug, just on a personal level, we both worked on a project called Afterworld. You can find it on YouTube. It was really innovative for its time, remarkable what we were able to accomplish. Specifically, Dr. D with his art direction under the constraints that we have. It's brilliant work. And so it is my great pleasure to talk with him today and dig into, in this world of AI, he is based deeply in traditional methods, but has embraced technology all along. And so I am fascinated to hear his take, not only on what he's doing now, but also his teaching and where he thinks things go from here. So it's a very long preamble. Dr. D, thank you so much for coming on. If you can introduce yourself to the listeners, tell us a little bit about your career, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Andy. It's awesome to be with you today. And it's been almost 20 years, or maybe even a little bit longer, since we worked together. And it seems like yesterday. That whole writer's room was just an awesome opportunity, fond memories, powerful memories. Changed my life as an artist and as an art director just because of the collaboration that we're able to have. I remember going to those meetings and breaking stories and breaking episodes and just the free for all of ideas. It was magical. So I'm of course met other of the writers there and have kept in contact with one or two of the other ones. But you are right there, man. I just remember working with you and being really impressed. We were just talking about how impressed I was with your literacy. You're just very well read and literate, and I love that. I love working with people that can pull out references from history and ideas from other books and movies and novels and just that broad, you know what I'm saying? That broad based literacy. And I grew up in rural Alberta, Canada, a Canadian. I'm a dual citizen, Canadian and US. And we moved to the States when I was 8. And I had never been to a public library before. Somewhere in that move from down to Illinois and then eventually to California, my dad took us to the public library and we could check out 10 books at a time. And I did for years, 10 books at a time. And I just read voraciously. I just realized that the knowledge that I was gaining from reading these amazing books that I loved, and a lot of them were science fiction. In fact, all of them were science fiction and mythology, and they're just amazing, fed my imagination. That's one of the things I teach is that knowledge feeds the imagination, right? And the more knowledge you have, the greater your imagination can be. And that's why I value literacy and the people I work with, like you and others. And now I value that for my students to encourage them to find ways to engage their imaginations in the storytelling. And it really is about having that broad based curiosity and interest in finding things out. There's a book by Richard Feynman, scientist, great scientist that I love. And I think it's called The Pleasure of Finding Things Out. And man, if there's anything I can point to that brings me more pleasure in life other than my family, my friendships, and, the things I believe in, it's that constant wonder finding things out. That's a real pleasurable.
Absolutely. I think I have driven my wife bonkers over the years where I start to get a little cranky when I'm not creating and when I'm not learning.
Mhm.
She knows that it's time for me to pick something to deep dive on when I'm running around the house saying input, input, input. Like I'm looking for something to feed the imagination because I go too long
Yeah,
without. I start to starve. But so in your quest to learn, I'm beginning to understand even more now that, as you were, heading into your career as an artist and working in digital design and digital artwork, that anyone who's that hungry to learn and to grow, of course you're going to embrace technology. Of course, when tools come along like CAD and CGI and now AI, that it is another thing, like you greet it with excitement because, like, oh my gosh, there's another thing to learn here, something to play with, something to iterate with. What is it capable of? What is it not capable of? How can I use it? How can it use me? And so I'm kind of curious in, looking back in your evolution as an artist, an art director, just as a person who creates, that these tools that came along, what was your relationship with them as time went on? What are tools that really stood out to you that kind of shaped the artist that you became?
yeah, the desire for knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge for me started with in the context of my family, my mom and dad, my mother. My brother was always the artist. He was an amazing artist that won awards and did all this really cool stuff. And I was frankly intimidated by him. And my mom knew though, and so she made sure that I had reams of paper and construction paper and glue and things I could make stuff out of. And I always kept my art hidden because I didn't want to compete with my brother. I felt intimidated by him and all of that. Of course, now, he became a fantastic musician and was in the Navy band and very proud of him. He explored his creativity in a different way. But he always says, how did you become the artist? And I didn't, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know those things, but family played a lot of into it. My mom especially knew that she was raising an artist as a son and feeding that. And then my dad was a teacher in the aerospace industry, ran training programs for NASA and the Air Force, and worked on the space shuttle, and all these amazing things. And he headed up training programs for people that were engineers and that kind of thing. So I learned from him process, and that process started with learning how to shine shoes, learning how to sweep a floor, and he taught us those things that yielded great results. A mirror shine on a pair of shoes. Who shines shoes anymore? But that fed my belief and every time I sweep the floor after I've done a project, I think of my dad. It's like, okay, you sweep it all in a pile, we take all the big chunks, put it in first, and pretty soon you're left with just little piles of sawdust, and then you're done. It seems so simple, but at the same time, that's where I learned that good process yields good results, and that the process of how you do things is just as, in fact, I think more important than the thing that you make, right? Because it's the process, I call it process IP or process intellectual property, becomes that process is what endures long after the thing that you made endures. So I learned things helping you, assisting as we worked together to create Afterworld, I learned a ton of stuff that I took forward with me to my next job after that, and the next job, and then the next job. So I learned that process was really important. I learned that from my dad, and then the love of materials and the raw materials of paper and glue and scissors and plastic and all that from my mom, who so it started in the context of my home, and that's where my knowledge got fed, and my desire, my taste for knowledge, my hunger, my thirst for it, not only in the technology or the materials side, but also in the process side. So I feel just so lucky to have had that upbringing from parents that valued knowledge, valued the understanding of process, valued the value of hard work. I mean, we worked hard. And I, I always say, I'm not the most talented artist. There are plenty more that are way more talented than myself. But there are very few I've found that will work as hard as I do.
Don't sell yourself short on the talent front, my friend. Going back to that, so process matters, creation matters. One of the things that we wrestle with in the world of AI is people seeing either the process being taken away from them or the tool being so powerful in this question of agency. But one of the things that we've talked about before about how this is not the first time that tools have come along where people react and think this is going to change everything. And is this, or is this true art because now you're using these tools? And when we talked before, you talked about when CAD came into the world and, different industry reactions to that.
Yeah.
So take us back to that and about your adoption of it and then its evolution into things like CGI and sort of how that shaped your evolution as an artist.
Yeah. So I went to school at Brigham Young University, and I wanted to be an architect. So that was a graduate degree. So I had to get an undergraduate degree in a related field. So I went into civil engineering and realized very quickly that I was born without the math gene. And it wasn't feeding I loved the idea of scientific exploration and the process and the tools, and because there was no CAD uh, tool set at that time. So we were drafting. We had to take drafting classes and do things by hand. And so I learned how to use a drafting machine and learned about line weights and pounds that you would put on your drawings to keep it from smearing, and little pencil sharpeners. And so there was a technology component that I loved and embraced. And then when I graduated from school, in industrial design, I had done an internship at Ford Design Staff in Michigan, and I loved drawing cars. Absolutely loved vehicles, and I thought I wanted to be a car designer. And there were several of us. We didn't have a transportation design component; it was more product design. But we did projects with industry, and one of our teachers was a car buff and had gone to art center and graduated from art center with their degree in transportation. And he took a class, a foundation class, because I wanted to do more art stuff, and he was my teacher. And he invited the entire class, all 40 of us, up to his studio that in his home that he had built, and we spent the night there and went hiking up the mountain that was behind his home the next day, and looking and taking the journey through his studio. He had a 6 foot long table, and there were these huge 5 foot long side view renderings with markers and chalks of motorhomes that he was designing. My head exploded. And I just looked at him, and I looked at the drawings. I looked at him, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to make this kind of stuff. I want to learn how to do that. And he became a mentor and helped me get into the program, the industrial design program. And the rest is history. So I spent a summer at Ford of Europe, well, not Ford of Europe, but at Ford in Michigan. Um, that's where my love of transportation really came to the fore. And then my senior year, we had an electric car interior project with General Motors. Had George Boone come out he was the head of interior design at General Motors design staff. And I ended up getting an offer after graduation to work at Ford, but to go to Europe, Ford of Europe, and work in their car studios over there, or go to the tech center, GM Tech Center, where the GM design staff was. And I took the GM design staff and very quickly realized that I loved drawing cars way more than I was going to like designing them. And there is a big difference. It's design is difficult. It's hard, and I love the aesthetic of form and making renderings and all that kind of stuff. And I just realized that there was something more that I didn't know what was missing until I started having conversation with some of my former classmates who had gone to other studios. One of them in particular, named Stu Morgan, had gone to the East Coast and was working for Digital Equipment Corporation. And he was talking about CAD and how they were using CAD tools. My brain lit up. It was like CAD, computer aided design, and it wasn't hand drawing, control drawings as we called them. Where you have to dimension it, and tolerances and all that could be figured out for you. So it was kind of an artificial intelligence because you could apply math and had some tools built into it. So I went out to interview and I loved it. I loved the opportunity. And I just said, I'm going to do this. And I bet my entire career. And I left General Motors after a year and a half. And I went out to Digital Equipment Corporation and spent a fair amount of time out on the East Coast, first for Digital, and then worked for Data General after that, and then Wang Laboratories somewhere in between there. So three of the major kind of high tech companies, all using CAD. Ended up when I was at, I can't remember if it was Wang or Data General, but one of them I got put on the subcommittee to actually pick the next CAD tools that we were going to use. So I got to see them all and just became more enamored with them. And about that time, the PC, the personal computer, was, you know, had been discovered and invented. And all of a sudden, instead of a $500,000 workstation, run by a mainframe computer, CAD tools became PC based. They could sit on your desktop and worked with a program called CAD Key. And I mean, those tools just fascinated me. And the interesting thing was, at the same time, people were, and industrial designers and engineers are up in arms going, "Oh, it'll replace us. It'll take our jobs, and we won't be able to work anymore because computers will do it all for us." And I didn't believe that, and I still don't believe it because I believe in the creative ability of human beings to use tools. And about the same time, there was an educator in, I think it was Center for Creative Studies in Detroit. His name is Del Coates. And Del said, "A fool with a computer is a more dangerous fool." And I've since realized that he adapted that from "a fool with a tool is still a fool." It's an old saying. I just realized that, if I'm going to use these tools to be an even more amazing designer, I have to understand aesthetic and human factors and engineering. And I just took that on as a challenge and embraced the tools. And I think that again, that goes back to growing up in a home where exploration and taking risks and trying stuff and making mistakes and was encouraged, and embrace the opportunity to learn new things. And I know that came from my dad, who didn't finish high school, joined the Canadian Army. This is World War II. Went to war, got wounded. Got went back home. He finished high school and went to college when I was a young teenager, so many years later. But he valued learning and learning new things, and that ingrained it in us too by his examples. That's how I first embraced CAD, and I never looked back. And you know, I didn't. It didn't replace me as a designer, as an artist, but my knowledge of CAD and my abilities, I did replace designers and other artists that didn't embrace those tools. I got jobs where others didn't. I looked at their portfolios and they were amazing, but they didn't have the embracement of digital media tools that I was lucky to have that opportunity. But I also bet my career on it. And that kept me open to the emergence of CGI, computer generated imaging. And so later in life, as I was watching TV one night, I watched gas pumps dance on the screen. It was a Chevron commercial back in the day, and I'm going, "What the heck?" Look at that. And that introduced me to the use of computer generated imagery, which was pioneered by Evans and Sutherland, and my old alma mater, Brigham Young University, had had a program that they developed called Movies BYU, which was one of the first graphic user interface technology and resources. So I don't know. It's a long, winding path, and I love technology. I love technology too, coupled with my foundation in being able to draw and sketch and ideate. And so if you don't want to be a fool with a technology tool, then have a foundation in traditional skills. And I have that as well. And everybody I know that is really good at using technology tools, they know how to sketch and draw and make ideas, and they have a good foundation in the traditional skills. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that you touch on something important there, which is a theme that's emerging in a lot of these conversations about not being so dependent on and reliant on the tools, that you have to have an underlying skill set that you have developed. That I mentioned this on another podcast, but you almost want to have control groups, but we're going to run into it anyway. Like people like us who are later in our careers, shall we say, that we had time before these things were in the world to develop our skills and the underlying skills. And then the tools get introduced at a time where it's like, okay, I trust my story sense. You trust your artistic sense, and you can see how to weave these tools in. And it's different. I'll get to this because I'm very curious to ask you about your students, in that they are entering a world where they are simultaneously developing those underlying skills while also playing around with the tools, because the tools are
Yes.
there to be used. And so they're going to develop in a fundamentally different way um, than than we have. But like you said, and as many of the people I've talked to have said, it's going to take some discipline, but you have to do the reps. You have to get up and sit at the keyboard. You have to get up and sketch and draw and play around, where not everything is a text prompt and then you play with it. There's a place for that, but you need to have the underlying artistic skills and not only sensibilities, but also just practice and exposure to other art before you lean so heavily on the tools that you have a flawed foundation.
Yeah, and that's the idea of literacy. I'm the analog literate, right? I can sketch and draw. I am color literate. I understand color theory. I understand how to learn. I'm learning literate. I know how to approach a tool and learn the interface. And all these are varying levels of literacy that combine in an entire universe of literacy, that instead of just saying, okay, I know how to use this one tool to create this one kind of story because that's what I've consumed up to this point. So you're exactly right. And so when our students are coming in with higher and higher capability of tools, of digital tools, and we ask them to show us sketchbooks and figure drawing, because we want them to have these analog tools, these foundation in understanding the form and function and materials. And what I love about USC is that this is ingrained not only in our school, but also in like a school of architecture. They have an entire class that's just around building models and sketching. I think they have a fundamental class where they keep a sketchbook and a kind of a journal, and they wander around and sample the world around them through their eyes and then reproduce it. And this was the idea of what I saw in my own schooling, as well as learning how to see doesn't happen unless you're walking around in the world and seeing how light interacts with form. Now we can hit a button and have it ray trace, but that's not an understanding of why it's looking. And if you don't understand it, why it's looking a certain way, there's no way for you to change it, to manipulate it to become what you want it to be. And that's what I call bending technology to my artistic will. I refuse to let technology bend me to its will. And that's where a lot of students and practitioners are, is that they get to a certain point and it's all the tool will give them. And this includes AI. And they go, okay, that's good enough. They don't exercise their imaginations. They don't have the literacy to say, I want it to be different, but I don't know how to tell it to be different because I don't understand the fundamental physical properties of light to tell it, well, I want ambient diffusion, I want refraction, I want occlusion, excuse me, I want diffraction, refraction, diffusion. I want to apply a scientific phenomenon to the atmosphere to create the kind of lighting conditions that I want because I don't understand how to tell it. And if I don't understand it, I can't. I have to take what it gives me. And it pisses me off, actually. I don't want to take what it gives me. I want to change it. I hope that makes sense, but that's
Absolutely. While you were saying that, I was taken back. I had a short stint in my early days in Hollywood at Hanna-Barbera in their licensing department, where they basically had artists on hand who were evaluating licensee artwork and got into some fascinating conversations with some of the artists there. And Lauren Zide, in the less than 1% chance that she's listening to this, that she talked about seeing the world in terms of color and how interacted with each other, and that like going for a walk, like seeing the light and the different shades of green that are coming through sunlight through a leaf, and all the different shades and geometric shapes she was seeing. And it's like, yeah, you see the world differently. I see things in terms of words. When people are talking, I'm shaping everything in terms of dialogue. And it's just your artistic sense shapes how you perceive the world. And having those underlying skills, it makes you, I know just over the last few days, like putting in some prompts and what I'm getting back. And it's like, no, you're trying to take this in a direction that I know is not artistically where this needs to go. Stop it. You will bend the story. You will
that's
omit.
right. That's right. And I think that's where that story I told you when we first talked about when I took that very first class in learning how to see and recreate what I saw in pen and marker and paper analog, where we're given the assignment to go to a Kmart parking lot and find a hubcap and draw what we saw. And it had to be a chrome hubcap. And so we went and we all, there's 30 of us students, and we all came back 2 hours later and put our stuff up on the wall and got lots of feedback from the instructor and what we did right and what we needed to improve on. That continued to open our eyes up to what was real. We got to this one student and he drew a circle and he took a silver Prismacolor pencil and he colored the whole thing in silver Prismacolor pencil. Just
Mhm.
to him, Chrome was, oh, you need a silver pencil. And it was like, and he improved. He figured it out. But the rest of us had seen reflections. We saw the reflection of the sky. We saw the reflection of the car next to the car that we were drawing. We saw the horizon. We started seeing things as they really were in terms of light interacting with the surface, which is fundamentally what product design is about. If you want to create beautiful form, you got to understand how light interacts with the form. And so that was our first introductions. So the idea of that singular idea about being able to perceive and tune our eyeballs to seeing what is really there in terms of reflection and light and shadow. And that's where I discovered that if a windshield pointing up at the sky, if there's nothing overshadowing the windshield or reflecting into it, it reflects the sky. And the windshield is opaque. But the minute you lean over it and you put your shadow on top of that glass, that dark reflection of me and shade reflecting into the glass or of a building, all of a sudden I can see through the glass into the interior of the vehicle. So, I mean, little phenomenon like that, the physics of light just blew my mind and became a lifelong obsession that I still have today. So and then the other story was just understanding, for instance, the moon. When we see the moon, how bright it is, it reflects about 8 to 10% of the sunlight that hits it. So we're not seeing 8% of the sunlight. Whereas when we look at the sun, we're seeing 100% of the sunlight, except for what's absorbed in the atmosphere. We can't look at it, it'll burn our eyeballs out, but our eyeballs don't get burned out looking at the moon. So the idea of, do I want to be a moon reflecting light as an artist? And I think that people that just take the tool and take what it gives them, they're like the moon. They're just reflecting light. Whereas if I want to be the sun, I want to be a source of light, which means I'm generating light. Then there's a difference between being a sun artist and a moon artist. I hope that makes sense. But I want to be a source of light. I want to be alive as an artist. I want to grow. I want to reinvent. I want to rethink. I want to collaborate. I want to inspire. I want to inspire change and grow, and that's being a source of light and not just reflecting light.
Yeah, it's that concept of, am I doing something original? Knowing that all of us, to some degree, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and that we are all built on all that we have learned and been exposed to, which is a bit like an AI with, scraping all of the data, but like we have the data of our lives and our human experience of our lives, and that shapes the artists that we become. Just like you talked about your parents and the anxiety of influence from your brother, where you hit it, but maybe you got better because you wanted to live up to that. All of these things add up to who we become. And then if we embrace the possible originality of all of that, then we can be the sun. Or we can just sit back and, like you said, reflect some of the light of all the people that we have learned from, grown from, studied from, and just reflect that. That's not to say that the moon isn't beautiful, but we're
Right.
not but we're not.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the way that you become a sun is that you learn how to reflect the light that comes into you. You allow the light to change you to the point where you can come up with something that nothing is created out of whole cloth. You say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I stand on the shoulders of Joe Johnston and John Berkey and Beksinski and all these other artists that I admire and have informed me as an artist that they're not even known out in the world because they were artists that worked in the studio with me, and they were sources of light and changed how I looked at things. You changed how I looked at something, in our process, where it was, um, very collaborative and that kind of thing. So when I look at embracing technology, we changed it when we did Afterworld together. We changed how technology was being deployed in an episodic 130 episodes for, which, holy cow, I can't believe that we did it. It was like eating an elephant. We had to eat it one chunk at a time. But that was, and then, after that, I went on and worked on Bionicle was the next kind of project I went on, and that was fantastic. I didn't invent Bionicle, but I got to, as a production designer, invent what those worlds look like that before that had existed only in a few pieces of artwork. And so I worked with directors and storyboard artists and the creators of Bionicle, and we created some really compelling looking worlds.
And what's interesting, when you mention Afterworld, I don't know if I told you this, but um, when it comes to that, connection of being the sun or the moon, um, the number of times when Brent would reach out to me. And for those who are listening, it's Brent Friedman, who was the creator and executive producer. He would say, like, because towards the end, we were having to be a little innovative with how we were telling it. And so you had certain outlines, and it's like, this is what we're going for, and this is what we're looking for. But, you were coming up with the shots while Brent was like, Andy, can you write some dialogue that's going to go with this? Because we know what the
Yeah,
story's going to do, but it's not written yet. And then he would get in touch with me and he'd be like, brace yourself. These final weeks of this thing, what Dr. D is doing is like, it's almost like the highest of compliments, because you're basically saying this person is a sun, not a moon, where it's like, how did you come up with that? How did he do that? And that's when it's like, you can't conceive of it because you were breaking ground. You were doing something innovative, creative within all of these confines, and just blowing people's minds. And I don't know if we fully conveyed to you how many minds you blew back in the day, where it's just like, how is he coming up with this? And maybe it's the journey of 130 episodes where you get to this place that you haven't been before. Maybe this is where you get when you're on bite 117 of the elephant, where you're just like,
yeah.
okay, I'm in this zone. I know what this needs to be. I can now see where it's ending and how it's coming together. And yeah, the number of times we just said, how is he coming up with this? But it's the culmination of a journey, right?
Yeah, it is. And thank you for telling me that. I had no idea. For me, we talk about artistic inspiration. And inspiration literally means spirit in me, coming through me. And I always think about ideas don't come from me, they come through me. And going back to the mythology of the Muses, right? The Muses in Greek mythology, they're actually talked about being possessed by the Muses. And of course, we don't use that, since we don't want to have demonic possession, and thereby we ignore the fact that there may be angelic possession as well, But I would tell you very clearly that the ideas that came through me came because I had prepared my heart and my mind to receive them, but they didn't come from me. They came through me. And I know that sounds like woo woo woo. And, but there's this spiritual aspect. I'm sure that you'll agree that there's something about when you're in the flow, the creative flow, and there's some authors that have written about creativity and flow that I really love. But there's nothing like experiencing what I experienced in the context of the Bionicle and the Afterworld projects. Afterworld specifically because of that table that you sat at under Brent's direction and the collaboration I felt. It wasn't just me, it was everybody that was in there, created that vibe, created I call it a safe container, if you will, for that those ideas and inspiration to come in and inspire all of us. But thank you for saying that. I had no idea. And all I know is I loved it, and it was one of those experiences that changed my life as an artist, changed my heart, my mind, my DNA. I was lucky, I was lucky to be there and have that. And as I've continued to work with Brent over the years, worked with him last year on some other things using AI generative art for a TV show that he was helping to get set up. Just have those same feelings. And so it's so easy in collaborating. I'm sure it would be if you and I worked on something together. It's so easy to slip into that trusting the universe, that it'll give us the inspiration that we need to tell a great story. I hope that's helpful
Well, yeah,
as
no, absolutely.
an explanation.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you touch on something. Trust is a very big part of the creative process. And so is
Mhm.
this idea that it is a gift that we've been
Yeah,
given.
yeah,
Whatever my beliefs around faith, one thing that I have reinforced with my own family, my own children, is that the gifts that you've been given, your abilities are God's gift to you. What you do with those abilities are your gift to God. Again, whatever one might believe about the divine, that these are gifts
absolutely.
and things pass through you. I love that idea. I've always loved the idea of sing to me, muse. Calliope as being the voice for writers. That's always felt the way to me. And I was actually just trying to find it, and I'll share it with you later. But there's this poem that is escaping me at the moment. But essentially, it's a poetess who is saying that when I can sense when the poem is rushing towards me. And if I'm not ready, if I don't have pen and paper, I have to go get it because it's rushing at me. And if I don't get it, if I don't grab it like a tiger by the tail, it will leave me and someone else will catch it.
Yeah,
I've always loved
absolutely.
the idea.
That is absolutely the artist's path, and that's how we communicating that and helping. I can't teach that. I can talk about the fruit of the tree, how that we're eating this apple of inspiration, right? What fruit did it come from? Did it come from a religious belief? Did it come from a cultural belief? Did it come from a cultural context? Wherever it comes from, it's coming from that place that it's not us, right? It's outside of us. It comes through us. I learned the idea of being a tube through which inspiration comes from. And I learned that from a guy named Rich Grijalva, some work I did in the past with my own spiritual journey. And he was, I believe he's a Comanche or Apache in terms of his beliefs and where he came from. So he brought that idea of being a hollow tube to your point about preparation. I got to hollow myself out. I got to be ready. I have to create this place. And that is as much discipline. I talk to my students about taking care of their minds, making sure that they open their heart and their minds to inspiration. It's somewhat difficult because unless you're unafraid to talk about love and faith and
Mm-hmm.
no fear, It's hard to articulate that, but I'm 71. I don't care anymore. I'm not going to, if I get fired because I tell somebody the inspiration will come to you if you hollow yourself out and prepare yourself for it through literacy and, you know, collaboration and all that stuff. If people don't like that, then they just don't understand what it means to be an artist like you and like me. And I've seen it with so many people I admire. Brent Friedman is somebody that has it, you know, Scott Easley, who you met, and John Brennan, also, who have, you know, has come on the podcast. So that the moon receives the light and reflects it back out. Sometimes I'm a moon. I don't think of myself ever as being a source of light because that's outside of me, but I can convey more than 8% of the light that comes to me. I can convey almost 100% of it. By being true to what I've received. And I mean, I've received inspiration of stories to tell that grab a hold of me and don't let me go until I do something about it.
Yeah. The
They haunt.
yeah, just got to remember that the sun never says it's a sun. All it does is shine.
That is right. That's awesome. So when I think of the key question here is what can AI do well to help tell our stories and what remains human about the process? What remains intrinsically human is our life as an artist. Am I growing? Am I reinventing myself? Am I rethinking? Am I collaborating with others? Do I aspire? Am I inspired by the people I work with? Do I conspire to have a conspiracy? Let's try this. Let's do this. Am I open to evolution, my own evolution, and the evolution of how stories are told? When I was working on my master's degree, I read trying to remember his name, but he wrote a book called The Fatal Frontier, and it was about going out into the wild where there was no United States, past the borders. You go out there and it's like, you could be killed out there, you know, by lots of different things. And that idea of exploring unknown lands and worlds and exploring the emptiness out there. And that could be internal emptiness, it could be evolutionary, it could be historical, whatever. But I want to be out on that fatal frontier, you know, put my butt on the line to learn. I've never gotten there by being safe and being um, traditional, and it's always been embrace. What can AI do for me? It'll make me a better. It'll make me a better artist. Maybe now's the time to, you know, bring up the accident that I had
Yeah.
um, last year. I was in a pretty bad car accident. I won't go into all the details, but I was in the intensive care unit for a week, and I've just now, in the last month, gotten back to the point where I have enough energy and my blood work is good. I'm not anemic anymore. My brain injuries have healed. My ribs, all 11 broken ribs, have all healed up. And, you know, the thing that hasn't healed up is this hand that I've made a living drawing on. And you can see the trigger finger
Yeah.
right there. I was holding on to the wheel when the airbag went off and something happened, nerve damage or something. So it looks like I got it full use, but when I go to intentionally try to draw or sketch or write my name or I can't. It looks like a very old person. There's an aspect of AI called LoRA. LoRA models they are like they're a subset of LLMs, large language model, which is billions and billions of pieces of information, artwork, whatever. I can take a smaller set and I can train it on my own artwork. After 30 years of being an artist, I have hundreds, if not several thousand pieces of artwork that I've created. I can take those and that's what I'm in the process of doing right now is training my own Duane Loose language model that has my style, my ability to sketch, and imagine I'll have it mostly put together by the end of the summer. I need anywhere from 10 to 100 drawings, which I can easily get. I'm in the process of gathering those and putting them in the categories of what I want to train my personal AI LoRA model on because I'm not able to sketch like I used to. Right? So if I have that model that can sketch in my style and produce in my style, that I can type fine and I can give it the prompts that engage my imagination and learning how to generate, the prompts, and that's the key, engineering those. But that's another reason I'm so excited about LoRa is that for me, and I'm recovering from a pretty severe accident. I'm lucky to be alive. I want to continue my life as an artist, and AI in that aspect is helping me, assisting me.
And it's remarkable. That's one thing some people have talked about how empowering AI can be, and the accessibility question of the ability to speak. If one can't type, you can interact with these models and create. That if the act of creation is what is ultimately human, having a tool that can help you bring something into the world that wasn't there before because or in your case where it's like you can continue to create art in your style, it has learned your style, and but it is going to be directed by the same artistic consciousness to add to that art. And what a remarkable thing that because you're expanding the window of time, because whether we like it or not, artistic skills can diminish. It doesn't happen for everybody, but certainly there have been plenty of artists who have talked very raw and openly. Hemingway is a great example, culminating in the end of his life, where it's just the artistic, when he would reach for stories, they weren't there anymore.
Yeah,
And or the process became much harder, and that the natural ease with which creation may have happened during one phase and then it becomes harder later, or in the case of physical skills like yours or an injury, it's like, okay, I can't do it the same way, but maybe I can now. That ability to have this AI tool that knows the heart of your creation and can help it keep beating, which is a remarkable thing.
yeah, I like the way that you phrase that. Shows the heart of creation and helps it to keep beating. Yeah, I'm excited about the journey. I don't know where it's going to take me. I don't know if my hand is much better, but it's still impaired. I don't know if it'll get any better. Do I still try to draw? Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, it's like, how does I'm learning something new for me. And that's the first thing I try to teach anybody who's going to approach the AI artwork is just build on what you already know. If you're not an artist, go and learn some artistic principles. Learn the principles, elements of design, try some 2D stuff, try to experiment, and then move into AI to experiment. A lot of Midjourney that I use, there's a lot of camera, some lighting prompts. If you know the lighting glossary of terms, it's easier to create something that is controllable. Well, that's one of the things I hear all the time. I got something I like, but I can't reproduce it. I can't get it to do more of that. And well, that's just a matter of just keep trying. It tests your resiliency. And so I look at it as not only a tool or a mediation kind of tool that is going to help me as I get older. And, thank God I'm not cognitively impaired, but who knows? That could happen. Students tend to keep me feeling young, although I don't look it anymore. But then the whole idea of setting an example for the students that may be out there that want to, but they're still bound up in the peer pressure of the ethics of it. And I have the same question, but what are the ethics of not embracing it? Unless we're willing to consider both sides, then there is no conversation except one based on fear and self-doubt. And I mean, as artists, we got enough of that fear and self-doubt going on. I know I'm kind of rambling, but when I
No, no,
think about
you actually
think
touched.
about the example that we want to set for our students and embracing it. And Scott, John, and I, and with the support of a lot of faculty, including our chairman of the IMGD, is that we want to explore it deep enough and thoroughly enough so that we can do it. We can have a USC way of teaching it and embracing it, and which includes the ethical considerations. We have a faculty member that's on it. He's on that, and just an amazing mind. His name's Gordon, and I trust him. Go back to that idea of trust. Is that I trust him because I've had enough conversation with him to know that he's not going to try to force me to do something I don't want to do, or he's also not going to let me do something that would damage I don't want to say reputation, but damage the soul, the spirit of our school, which is all about collaboration and embracing of new emerging technology. Where will we be in 5 years, 10 years from now? Holy cow.
And that was where I wanted to go to bring this and wrap it up. But before I do that, I just wanted to say I love that idea. What are the ethics of not doing this? And this is why I adore your brain, because no one has thought to ask that in any of these conversations that I've been having with people. It's always been the question of what are the ethics of using this, and trained on everyone's work, and are you being true to your own artistic skill? But coming at it from the other direction, these tools exist, we should be using them, because not using them is to not perhaps shape the future of these tools through the lens of the artist and people who know what they're doing, people who have been embracing these tools for decades, that there is knowledge and experience that goes with, like, ethically speaking, we should be using them to see what they're capable of and perhaps guiding as best we can their evolution. But tapping into what you were saying, like, there is something brewing at USC right now with you and your colleagues. Having talked to two of them and having talked with you, I am fascinated, and I wanted to sort of lead into that question of, how are your students wrestling with AI? And for them and for you, where do you think things might go from here? Like you said, 5, 10 years, it seems almost unimaginable. But this is what we do as artists and creators. We imagine. What do you think your students are going to be doing with this in 5 years? And what do you think your future holds with AI and our work?
I think our students, we have a full spectrum of, on one end, it's evil, it's going to replace artists, all the way up to, at this point, on some level, I don't know. The students are in that mode of, I don't know. And the ones that have tried to use it and have built on what they know in terms of artistic principles and elements. The ones that have tried it are like, and they're building on what they already know in terms of creative process. They're going, wow, this is amazing. They're enthralled with the speed with which they can create imagery and use it as inspiration, and then they can do paint overs on top. But they can only manipulate it to the extent that they have a knowledge of the underlying principles. So if they don't understand color theory, they're never going to be able to tell it, create this color, use this color palette, that kind of thing. What I So the students are full gamut, and the task as educators is not to make them wrong for how they feel, or make them wrong or right wherever they're at on that spectrum, resisting it. And there's a great book I just started reading called The War of Art. The War of Art, really great book. And it's all about resistance to change, resistance to new tools, resistance to new experiences, new ideas. And I know that's what's held me back as an artist. It's crippled me until I get to the point where I'm mature enough to go, you know what, I need to take a step back and I need to change how I think about this, because it's not really doing me any good or anybody else any. My task as a teacher is to, wherever they're at on that spectrum, is to not to make them right or wrong uh, of where they're at. It's to listen to them and then invite them and encourage them to, if they've never tried the tool, just try it. Figure out how to use it so it works for you. And if it needs to be in an ethical framework context, you'll figure that out because of who you are and the values you have. But you know what? If you're somebody who is a plagiarist, and if you're somebody and we we've seen that in academia, and if there's somebody that just isn't ethical, in terms of artistic expression, that's going to show up whether you're using AI art or not. You're going to, copy somebody else's work and use it. I mean, 10 years ago when I was teaching at the Art Institute, we had a project, and I'm looking at this model a student had made, and I'm going, man, that looks familiar. So I did a Google image search and found the exact model that he used, and basically downloaded and presented it as his own, right?
Jeez.
So there's
Yeah.
people that are dishonest will continue to be dishonest. So I trust the process that over time, it's the same as ZBrush, introduction of a brand new technology and all the clones that are out there now, and embracing that. And not everybody's embraced it, or the software Houdini, which has now been introduced in the game development pipelines. These are all tools that have some aspect of mathematical intelligence algorithms. Those are all math, artificial intelligence. It's not trained, but it has grammar and has rules, and we've been using it for forever. This is just the next evolution of it. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's how I'm going about it as a teacher, is that create a safe place that they can experiment and try and figure it out how it works for them. Because really, ultimately, that's going to be how the tool gets presented. I use it very different than Scott, very different than John, and in a similar way as some of the other artists that I admire that are using the tools. I have a friend who's an amazing artist and painter, and we have to have a conversation because he's curious about it. And I'm going, holy cow, with your skills, your fundamental artistic skills, using it as a tool, I'm going to be blown away by what you do with it. Because it's not about the tool, it's about the artist. And that's always been the argument between Max, Maya, Softimage, Blender, Lightwave. It's
Yeah,
not the tool,
yeah. The tools are
it's the art.
neutral, and it just opens up possibilities, at least in my experience.
Yes.
And I love that you're reading The War of Art. It is one of my favorite books about creation. When you get to the end,
Yeah.
touch base, because he goes to some very interesting and somewhat dark places at times about that process of how the universe is full of, as you said, resistance, but there's this destructive act, and you have to fend that off to create.
Yeah.
And I think about that often insofar as you mentioned speed in creation, and that people, students, and otherwise, the ability to iterate and create quickly, that some of that friction and some of that resistance, maybe it gets a little easier to push past that. And we can debate to the ends of the earth whether fighting the resistance is the point, that the art that you create when you have to fight to bring it into being has a different flavor and taste to it than something that comes so easily. But in the end, the fact that people are able to create more, and if we believe that the human act of creation is the point, then shouldn't we celebrate the tools? As neutral as they are, they're empowering us to do the thing that we're here to do, and empowers more people to do it and to find the creation that they have inside of them. But sorry, I didn't mean to go on a big old ramble there. But
No, that's very well said, and I say amen to that.
all right. Well, I thank you so much for coming on. And to all of you listeners, one thing that we are going to try to pull together, because at this point you have heard three members of the USC IMGD department, is trying to get these three gentlemen into a digital room together. And after they've listened to each other's podcasts, being able to talk about the topics that we hit on, maybe go to some new and interesting places and talk about the program there, what the students are doing. And because the students are the next generation of people who are going to be playing with these tools for decades to come. They're the ones who are entering into this future that we don't know what it's going to look like. We're just pretty sure it's going to be full of wonder and experimentation. And so would love to get you guys talking about what it is to shape those minds, what you're seeing, what you hope that your program becomes, and where it goes from there.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm going to continue the conversation. Of course, we probably have 15 to 20 faculty out of I don't know how many we have in the IMGD program, but we have a good group that's meeting weekly, and there's some fascinating individuals that I'm going to introduce you to,
Please.
because they have very passionate views about the areas that they're thinking about how to use AI. We'll make those conversations. I'll make those introductions after I speak with them, and just say, hey, would you like to be? And they're very unique. I mean, one of the faculty members is totally focused on health and using game apps and technology to actually heal people. It's a very fascinating faculty member. And then the other one I mentioned, whose name is Gordon, who's focused on ethics and worth worth a conversation, definitely, and others as well.
I've been searching for someone to talk to about the ethics of AI and the ethics of creation in this world of AI. So that would be brilliant. So again,
Okay.
thank you so much for coming on. We will
Thank
be
you.
again soon, and this has been fascinating. And as I said at the very beginning, this is meaningful to me to have this kind of conversation with you. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for being my friend.
Right back at you. That's lovely.
Thanks for listening to the Creative AI Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit creativeaipod.com.